Study Session 3, The Mind-Brain Relationship. Introduction. This study session teaches that most behavior of animals and human beings are responses to neuronal changes and activities in the brain. In other words, what we do are practical reflections of the response of the brain to incoming stimulus. Learning outcomes. At the end of this study session, you should be able to appraise the 3 discussed experiments in this session to propose the concept of mind-brain relationship. Many people use the term mind in a way that makes it unobservable and unavailable to scientific study. Perhaps it is better to state that the mind is just another way of saying brain activities. The mind could be observed like a physical entity, separate from the body. This is why it is possible to observe the mind of other people. Although there is little scientific evidence to prove that the structure and organization of the brain give rise to mental experience, evidences abound that various kinds of brain damage lead to specific changes in behavior and losses of sensory capacity. Brain damage may therefore relate to mind damage. Additionally, evidences arising from the study of behavioral effects of electrical stimulation of the brain also support these viewpoints. Control of behavior by electrical stimulation of the brain. In 1870, Fritsch and Hitzig reported that mild, non-destructive electrical stimulation of portions of the cerebral cortex of a dog could cause muscle movements. At low intensities, the electrical current stimulated discrete, limited movement always on the side of the body opposite the stimulation. Depending on the exact point stimulated, the dog will move his neck, back, abdomen, tail, leg, or some other part of its body. Repeated stimulation of the same point consistently elicited the same response. Later, experiments yielded similar results for many species. Electrical activity occurs naturally in the brain at all times. Ordinarily, this electrical activity is caused by nerves sending messages from the sense organs. Their impulses combined with electrical activity already present in the other areas of the brain to produce activity in other areas, which then activates still other areas. Later, some activities in the areas of the brain that control movement was observed. Fritsch and Hitzig had already stimulated the movement controlling areas, bypassing all the preliminary stages. Electrical stimulation of the brain can evoke not only simple muscle movements, but also more complex sequences of behavior, particularly if the animal is awake during the stimulation and free to move about. Workings with chickens, von Hout and von St. Paul, 1960, implanted electrodes on the skull to hold them in place. Later, they were able to attach wires to the exposed electrodes and pass a weak electrical current to the brain of an animal while it was awake and moving about. Stimulation of various areas elicited such behaviors as feeding, drinking, grooming, turning the body to one side, sleeping, sitting, escape flight, and aggressive attack. The behavior elicited depended on the exact location of the electrode and the intensity of the stimulation. In brackets, stronger current could stimulate more cells. The elicited behavior also varied depending on the environmental stimuli. For instance, In later experiments with rats, stimulation of certain areas led to eating if only food was present. In brackets, Wallerstein, Kos, Kakolowski, 1970. Similarly, Hess, 1944, found that electrical stimulation of certain areas could induce an animal to fall asleep suddenly. Stimulation of more complex behaviors. Jose Delgado, 1969, introduced some technological advances that permitted him to investigate the electrical stimulation of a wider variety of behaviors. He advanced the experiments of von Holt and von St. Paul, 1960, by attaching permanent electrodes connected to a monkey's skull to an electrical stimulator. He found that stimulation of some points produced normal coordinated walking in circles, running, falling asleep, cessation of spontaneous movement, or loss of appetite. Also, with 5-second stimulation, the monkey had a response lasting 10 to 14 seconds. The monkey changed his facial expression, turned his head to the right side, stood up on 2 feet, circled to the right, walked on 2 feet to a pole in the center of the room, climbed the pole, and then came down, growled, threatened, and sometimes attacked another monkey, and finally approached the group in a friendly manner and then resumed normal behavior. Study session summary. In this study session, you have learned that the mind is just another way of saying brain activities. Despite existing ambiguities, the mind could be observed like a physical entity separate from the body. Evidences abound that various kinds of brain damage lead to specific changes in behavior and losses of sensory capacity. Brain damage may therefore relate to mind damage. Evidences arising from the study of behavioral effects of electrical stimulation of the brain also supports this viewpoint. End of study session 3. Thank you for listening.